Today we are going to learn how to make a print from a plate. Okay? The cool thing about printmaking is you can make multiple copies of things, which then you can go back in and play with. So to start, you have 6 vocabulary words. In the interest of shortening these videos, I will be giving you the vocabulary words throughout the lesson, so be listening for the definitions for print, braille, baron, plate, and proof. I can start you off with print. A print is something that is made by rolling ink onto a plate, which there are many different types. This one is a collagraph. And it's made out of cardboard and yarn. And then after you roll the ink onto the raised sections, you transfer the ink to a piece of paper. Listen for braille, baron, plate, and proof. All right. You have 2 sections of craftsmanship standards for this portion of our project. You have the standards of craftsmanship that you need for your plate and the standards for your print. For your plate, you want to make sure that your image is raised from the cardboard. That way we have something to print off of, and that there's no loose yarn like this. For durability, you're going to seal your plate with Mod Podge. That way it can get a little damp and it won't deteriorate too quickly. That way you can get multiple prints. For attention to detail, you guys need enough detail to know what your object is. Consider filling some areas in. And then last, you also want to take up as much of the plate space as possible. Right? So a plate is simply an item that you use to make prints. In this case, we're using cardboard and yarn. Other types like etchings use copper, and then you use an acid bath to change the thickness of some areas of the plate. There's linoleum cuts in which you cut pieces of the plate away, wood block prints, lots of different types. For the print, you have a separate set of standards of craftsmanship. For function, you need to make it with moist paper. This is going to help as much of the ink transfer over as possible. Each print should be the same, or as close to the same as possible. It should be centered on the paper. For durability, you don't want any holes, rips, tears, or weak areas in your paper. Be careful because you can get these from getting your paper too wet or rubbing it too hard with your baron. And for attention to detail, you want to make sure all of the image has transferred over. The print is centered and you don't have any stray ink. I have some stray ink here. There is one more thing, and that is to remember that your printed image will be backwards when compared to your plate. So you guys will see that my nail clippers are oriented in one direction and my print they're oriented in the others. It's because we have to turn it over. So you end up getting a mirror image. All right, let's get making. Step number 1. Grid your reference image. So the first thing you need to do is get a print of your reference image and then grid it. You need to decide on the size of your squares for your reference image. They should be small enough that you don't get overwhelmed with details or lines within each square, but also large enough that you don't go insane with having to transfer over 100 different squares. Then you will transfer your image to your plate. You might have to do some math to get your reference image to fill most of your plates. Luckily for me, it was a 1-to-1 ratio. You may need to enlarge your squares or shrink your squares to get all of your object fitting or filling your plate, okay? So now that my image is transferred, I can move on to step 2, creating the plate. First, you will trace the lines of the nail clippers on your plate with glue. You're not going to trace the entire object because glue does dry, but you will trace a section at a time. I'm just using regular Elmer's glue. And you may have noticed I did not erase my grid lines. That is because we're printing from this plate and those grid lines won't transfer over unless I use the yarn to make those grid lines there. So there's a few ways to do this. You can cover a specific section and then from a larger piece of yarn, add each line. I am gently tapping with my finger, and when I need to turn a corner, I use my finger to hold the yarn down and turn, and then I continue to tap, tap, tap. Okay. Eventually you're going to need to cut the yarn, right? Because doing the whole thing with, you might be able to do the whole thing with one piece. That might also be really difficult. It's a little bit of problem solving that you're gonna be doing, and that's what makes art so much fun. I've decided I wanted to fill this area in. So I'm gonna put some glue in here, but not too much because I know it does spread around. I'm just gonna go back and forth. Until that shape is filled. And it turns out I need a little more glue right here. Squish that in there. Here we go. Now I've got some extra yarn. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to snip that off. Cool. And then I can wait for my glue to dry to cut that a little more accurately. Another way to do this is to estimate the size of the yarn that you'll need. Make a cut. And then glue it in. Okay. So you're gonna continue this process until every line that you need in your image is totally covered. All right, so we trace the lines with glue. We tap the yarn onto the glue. We let the glue dry. Then we trim the extra the little loose ends because we are paying attention to our standards of craftsmanship, right? Trim, 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 trim. Checking them all. Got one here. Actually, I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna Mod Podge that down, I think. Cool. All trimmed. And then we need to seal our plate with Mod Podge. All right. We do this because cardboard is a porous and it's not a very strong material on its own. And if we're constantly rolling ink on it and putting wet paper on it, it will eventually start falling apart. So for the part of the plate that I've got the yarn on, I'm going to use a sponge brush to tap the Mod Podge in there. Tap, 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 tap. You can sing a song to yourself while you do this if you like. Sometimes that's fun. Sing the song that you're listening to on your headphones, right? And get all the yarn nice and sealed. Then we also need to get the plate sealed. And to do this, you can use more of a rubbing motion with your sponge brush. Notice that I'm using the edge to get the sides of the yarn covered. Right? You want to do the whole plate because it is all going to come into contact with moist paper when we print. Also, if you end up getting stray ink onto any part of your plate out here, you'll be able to use a moist paper towel to wipe that ink off without threatening the durability of your plate. Cool. Once you're done with that, you will set your plate aside to dry. Clean up all of your materials. Make sure the Mod Podge that you use is closed and put back on the supply table, and clean your sponge brush out the whole way. If you don't, it will become solid and we won't be able to use it again. Okay? So, I am gonna go do that now. There we go, all nice and clean. Cool. Now all I do is run it under water and use it's like a sponge. Keep rinsing it out, all right? So now we have to wait for our plate to dry, and while we're doing that, you can write a little bit of reflection. You can reflect on the standards of craftsmanship, things that you would like to do differently. You can go work on extra practice. You can work on late work. I've got lots for you to do. Once your plate is dry, you'll move on to step 3, which is printing. Hooray! This is what we've been waiting for. All right, so to print, the first thing you need to do is practice with a proof. Okay, a proof is a print that you make from the plate on scrap paper. Okay, that way we have a good idea of what the image is going to come out like. It primes our plate so all the ink that it needs gets soaked in, and you get better prints on good paper. So this is the first proof that I made off of my plate, and then this is the second, and you can already see a big difference between the first and the second. So once I get a hang of printing the plate, proofing is a good way to practice the standards of craftsmanship for your print as well. Once you're confident and you're ready to move on, you can start printing. all right? So you are going to go through the same process for your proof that you do with your plates. The only difference is you will use scrap paper for your proof and you will use watercolor paper for your plates. Other than that, the steps all stay the same. So, we've got our watercolor paper. The first thing we're going to do is moisten the paper with a squirt bottle. This is going to help it pick more ink up. So you're going to spray, and then you're going to dab with paper towel to get all of the extra off. Now watercolor paper is pretty thick stuff, so you are, do it 2 or 3 times, but make sure you dab all of the extra water off each time so your paper's not too wet. Then you can set your paper aside and you can get your brayer and your ink. You want to load the brayer up with ink. This is looking a little dry, so I'm just gonna put a tiny bit more on. We have a water-based ink, which dries relatively fast. Something that we want to be watching. Notice I just did a little bit of ink. I'm going to spread it out a little bit, and then I am going to roll it until it looks like velvet. Nice and tacky. Once your brayer, which is it's almost like a pizza cutter, except it doesn't cut anything. It's like the thing that you use to paint walls too. It's a tool for transferring ink to a plate. And once it's loaded with ink, you will get your plate and very carefully roll the ink on. Now it is difficult not to get any ink, and I guess it depends on your image really, onto areas of your plate. I am doing my best, paying attention to how I'm holding the brayer. And notice I'm not doing this. If you do this, the ink comes off the brayer and then you're just going over the same part of the image that you already laid the ink down on, right? So I roll, pick up, roll, pick up, roll, pick up, till it's all covered. When I put my brayer down, I put it down on here. That way I don't dent the roll part. And then I get my moistened paper. I'm gonna spray it once more actually, just to make sure it's good. You are going to do your best to center the paper on so the moist part goes face down, and then you'll use a Baron. Now because I'm at home, I don't have a Baron, but what I do have is a spoon. A Baron works the same way. It's just something that has a firm surface that you can rub in a circular motion over your paper and your plate to transfer the ink. If you're curious about how it's going, hold the paper down and you can curve it up, but you don't want the paper to move. Make sure you get all the lines. And there's my print. Notice it's backwards. And then you will repeat that process. So I've got some craftsmanship issues there, right? You'll repeat the process. You'll get a new piece of paper, spray it down, reload your plate with ink, and then print. When you're finished, you want to wipe your plate, and you know what? It's actually something that you can do to get extra ink off. Wipe your plate, clean it up. Don't run it under water because it's still made of cardboard, right? Look at all that ink. So with a moist paper towel, clean it up. Clean up your workstation for the next person, and then put your work on the drying rack. See you later.